Ibrahim Traore, the Lion of Africa, the emerging face of the African independence, the new African independence movement. In this video, we're going to look at his astrology to decode who he is and what destiny may have in store for him. Folks, Ibrahim Traore has come on to the scene of global politics recently and has made quite a mark. He's stepping in the footsteps of the great African independence fighters and revolutionaries and anti-colonial fighters of the past century, people like Patrice Lumumba and Thomas Sankara and Kwame Nkrumah and others. And he is becoming a sort of an icon like those people, like those prior great independence fighters of the African continent. He's becoming an icon with the military style and with the big speeches that he's holding. He's quite eloquent. So it's important to understand what destiny has in store for Ibrahim Traore, who he is, what his intentions are, because obviously he's in a very important, strategically important region. If you look at the region where he is acting, so if you look at the region, the Sahel specifically, this is a region that is heavily contested by global powers. Traditionally, this was the influence, the sphere of influence of France. So all of these countries, a lot of these countries were actually part of the former French colonial empire. And to this day, a lot of these countries are part of the franc CFA, which is a currency system that essentially keeps them indebted to France and to Paris indefinitely and forces them to keep their national reserves in Paris. Now, it's a good deal for the French, not so much for the Africans, and a lot of them are starting to move away. And as you can see here, all of these countries that you can see in red have had military coups over the last couple of years. Some of them have been successful, like Burkina Faso, which has brought Ibrahim Traore to power, and others have not been successful, have been quashed by the military, like Nigeria, have been squashed by the military, and the battle is going on. One thing that's very interesting in the region is that the countries that have had successful military coups, they tend to get support from Russia. So Russia has very active troops. The Wagner group has been active in the region, and Russia is very heavily supporting those countries that are fighting against French and American influence. And this is important as the region is of key strategic importance with regards to military bases and with regards to resources, of course, which is one of the reasons why the current struggle is so central and significant for the people there. Just to give you an example, the French were to this day acquiring uranium, which is an essential resource, obviously, for France, that is a nuclear power and that has lots of nuclear plants that they use to create energy for themselves and for the rest of the Europe. And they were acquiring the raw materials for this from Niger. And Niger, the people of Niger, the country of Niger, was basically locked into this old post-colonial contract that some corrupt politicians back then had signed, who themselves had houses in Paris and sent their kids to Paris. And this contract would basically allow France to buy uranium in perpetuity for 13%, 13% of the world market value. The Nigerians were getting 13% of the value in perpetuity of their own resources for such a key important resource. And this has now ended with the military coup that took place in Niger, which is very much part of the movement of which Ibrahim Traore has become a veritable face and a leader. So let's look at the astrology of Ibrahim Traore and see who we're dealing with. What kind of person is this? What's going to be his fate? Is there going to be more in store for him? And I can tell you this much, that there's going to be some grave risks as well for Ibrahim Traore that I will be pointing out in this video. So make sure to watch it till the end. Now, when you see this chart here, we don't have the birth time, unfortunately. So we're working with a 12 o'clock chart. That kind of limits our range of information a little bit, but still we have enough to get an image of who this person is, especially because we're working with the stars and the asteroids. So that being said, we have here a really nice, on the one hand, he's a Pisces. Pisces you don't see very often in leadership positions like this, especially in positions that require inspiration and inspirational leadership. A Pisces sun can actually bring some of that mystique and some of that aura to the leader. And in addition to this, we have this powerful constellation here that you can see with Mars, Neptune. Mars, Neptune, you see this often with military leaders who are gifted by having a sixth sense for military campaigns. So Napoleon had this, for instance. Mars, the martial drive; Neptune, the higher sense, the sixth sense. And this constellation, it's here next to a Saturn and Uranus. So Saturn and Uranus, the rebel who breaks structures, right? So the revolutionary Uranus, and Saturn, the structures, the structure rebel. You see this often with revolutionaries, with people who break established systems, right, in order to renew them. So the gifted military leader, the structure rebel, and both of this is getting a powerful action here in terms of aspects, both from Pluto. So he's going to be ruthlessly effective and powerful in his military campaigns and in his revolutionary drive, and from Jupiter down here. So he's also going to be quite lucky in a lot of things. Jupiter is with Venus, the greater and the lesser benefic. So this brings good fortune, traditionally speaking, and this good fortune is flowing into his activities as a military leader and as a revolutionary. So, being favored by karma, basically being favored by destiny in terms of the occurrences that he experiences, in terms of what people who don't know maybe would just call luck, whereas in reality, this is not luck, but this is a karma that you have earned in previous incarnations, and that you come with, and that you come into this lifetime with, and then which manifests itself as this auspicious and fortunate constellation that's constantly going to shine fortune onto your path, basically. So now this is just some basic essentials to understand. Now let's see some other points here that make this more deep and interesting. We've got the Mercury here, and the Mercury is part of this talent triangle. You can see here flowing well with the structure rebel and the fortunate sun, and this Mercury, so basically the talent triangle, it means it allows him to express the power on the tip of the triangle very smoothly and effectively. And this Mercury, it's with Africa. It's with the asteroid Africa. You can see here. So he's a speaker. He's a messenger for Africa, the messenger for Africa, right? And you saw that recently he gave this big speech where he was speaking about the current world order, how the globalists see it, how the Western globalists see it as themselves being the empire of good, and then there being a empire of evil, which is typically Russia and Iran and whoever else they will identify as the current enemy, and the empire of slaves, which is states in Africa and elsewhere that are seen as pure places for resources. In South America, places that are mainly seen as resource repositories for the globalists. Now, this is not directed against the West as such or Western people, but against the globalist leaders of the West who are currently ruling the West, who in fact are making their own people, the Western people, suffer just as much as well under their rulership, with unchecked immigration and with so many other things that are currently wrong in the West. This just as a side note. But to go back to Ibrahim Traore, we see here with him additionally as well a very strong, when we go back to this constellation here with the Mars, this Mars is with Taur. You can see here Taur, and I'm just going to show you better a little bit so you can actually see this. It's with Torah, which stands for Thor, the thunder god, and Mjolnir. Mjolnir is the hammer of Thor. right? It's the hammer of the gods, of the hammer of Thor. So you have this Mars here as very clearly shows you as a divine weapon, the divinely empowered hammer of the gods, right? So he's basically, his destiny shows him as somebody who is supposed to fight, who's supposed to go to battle for great purposes, greater purposes than himself. Who are those purposes? What are they? We've got the asteroid Christ here, Christ, you can see that. And we've got on the opposite side, exactly opposite, and we always have to look at oppositions and conjunctions only. Exactly opposite, we have Sirius, the fixed star Sirius, which gives everything a cosmic role, makes you a cosmic messenger. And there's Wang Christie and Paradise, Wang Christie and Paradise. So these are two more asteroids that point towards him being destined to fight for Christ consciousness. Now, you're going to say, what am I referring to? Why is it Christ and so on? Isn't he a Muslim? He's a Muslim, Ibrahim, obviously. But first of all, for Muslims, Jesus is a messenger, a Messiah as well. But secondly, and more importantly, much more importantly, it's really not about what somebody's faith outwardly is. When we look at the chart and we see something like I just showed you, a propensity or a role that somebody's going to play in bringing about Christ consciousness or being on the side of Christ, this is something universal that you may find in a chart of somebody who's Indian or Chinese or whatever the case may be. This is something universal that's for all of humanity, just like in reality, the Lord Jesus Christ is there for all of humanity and is representative of the divine intervention for all of humanity. Now, when we go back to the chart, what else we see here is some worrying and concerning things that I have to point out as well. So far I've told you about his role as a gifted military leader, as somebody who has this fortunate constellation, who has fortune on his side, basically, who is brought into power by waves of collective transformation with the Pluto in order to become a messenger, in order to become a general. Now, what are the risk factors? What are the factors that I'm seeing here which warrant some attention? Now, on the one hand, you have the Pluto here being in direct opposition with Venus. You can see this here, Pluto in opposition with Venus. Now, this, typically, what does that mean? It could be simply somebody who, if you look at it just from a personal standpoint, could be just somebody who has some very intense relationships and a lot of relationship drama and so on. But obviously that's not all there is to the story. The Venus-Pluto opposition also stands for very intense manipulation and power struggles and dark experiences in relationships in general. This obviously includes also business relationships and strategic partnerships, political partnerships. So political partnerships with other powers. When we're looking at a leader, then that's what we have to interpret it as, not just as relationship problems with, your significant other, but we have to look at it as relationships, issues, power struggles, very deep and intense power struggles with partners, with other partners. And now when we add the asteroids here, it gets kind of more concerning because the Venus, it's with Sedna. Sedna stands for betrayal. Sedna stands for betrayal, right? It's a big story of betrayal. And what else do we have here? There is a crux, the fixed star, a crux. A crux also, it gives great power. His Pluto is on a crux. A crux also has the significance of power, of great power on the one hand, magic power, even occult power, but also negatively of manipulation and power struggles and betrayal as well. So both of these things point here to this Pluto-Venus having a very dark quality. This Pluto-Venus opposition is not just a normal Pluto-Venus opposition with the fixed star here. Everything, when you have a fixed star involved, it's going to have great historical importance. Now, when we look further, we also have here Hoover. Hoover stands for Secret Services. We have Washington, and we have Rockefeller. Okay, all of these are constellated in a wide conjunction with this constellation here, right? With the Jupiter in a wide conjunction and opposition here, right? With the Jupiter and Venus and with the Pluto here on this side. So what does it mean? We have basically here the markers that show me that Ibrahim Traore might have to deal with betrayal, specifically in the big power struggles that he is part of. There may come a time when Ibrahim Traore will have to face a historical betrayal, and he wouldn't be the first, obviously, who have had this type of fate. When you think back to the great independence leaders of the African continent that I mentioned before, Nkrumah, Lumumba, and so on, they all basically were victims of coups and of machinations and secret agency backed plans that played some of their own people against them, eventually had them face their demise eventually. Now, when we look at the chart again, in order to see where the source of this could be, it's not, you don't have to be a Sherlock Holmes type investigator really to understand and to know where this might come from. And it's pretty clearly written in the chart as well, because we have here in that constellation that I just mentioned before with the Pluto, there's also the asteroid Frank, which stands for Frankish Empire, is the old name of France. And on his sun, we have the asteroid Paris and Albion. And this asteroid particularly, or this sun constellation, it's also opposite the asteroid Caesar that you can see here, Caesar, which is obviously interesting insofar as Caesar came to power and then fell due to betrayal, due to a coup against him. So when you look at this, the cards seem pretty heavily stacked against Ibrahim Traore in terms of a move that may be made against him. Now, I'm not wishing this for Ibrahim Traore in any ways, and actually there's always many ways to realize any given destiny, especially if you know what you're doing, especially if you have the understanding and the maturity. There's ways for you to realize this pattern that I showed in a more benevolent and benign way, and there's those that will be seeing this in a very harsh way. So if anybody in Ibrahim Traore's camp is hearing this at any point, you're free to reach out. Dr. V is here to help you navigate and to understand in which time periods you may be looking at moves that will be coming in against you, because they will be coming in. And yourself, if you are interested in understanding the patterns of cosmic destiny and fate for yourself better, I'm also open again to work with clients. I'm open to consultations. Again, you can find the link in the descriptions below the video, and you can let me know in the comments as well to this video who you'd like to see next. We're going to do a lot of historical personalities. This is a great way both to really understand how astrological cycles and forces work, and also at the same time get an unfiltered and true view on the events that are happening, on the world affairs that are happening. So let me know in the comments who you'd like to see next. We're going to do much more here on this channel. We're going to learn as well. There's going to be so much more. Make sure to subscribe to this video if you haven't done that yet, and like this video, like it a lot, so we get this boosted and pushed out. And until the next time, I wish you all the best. Be well, be blessed.